Welcome to this week's Desk Side Chat. This week, we have Robert Fehlen joining us from Mission Cultivate. Robert, appreciate you joining us this week as our third-party guest.
Happy to be here, John.
Robert, this week, our topic of discussion is around the client discovery process. But before we get into that topic, could you please provide a little background on yourself and your firm, what you guys do?
For sure. Yeah. So at a 30,000 foot view, married, two kids, currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio. My brother actually is part of our organization as well. He's sitting behind the scenes here for moral support, listening in. But for Mission Cultivate, what we do as a company, we provide strategic thinking and planning services on both finance and marketing for small business owners, typically in the SaaS and e-commerce space, but expand out into service-based industries as well. And where we like to differentiate as well is crossing the line between business finance and personal finance as well, to really bring that full picture to business owners' lives.
And you have some industry experience, so in the financial industry. Can you just share a little bit about that real quick as well?
Yeah, for sure. So my background's in private equity. So that's kind of where I spent my 10,000 hours initially in the field, mainly focusing between commercial, multifamily real estate, some business acquisitions as well. Got into some consulting for banks, ultimately opened up a financial planning practice under a broker dealer, grew that practice to about 120 clients over a year and a half, and fell in love with the different way of working with business owners. So, and eventually exited the broker dealer model to really start over in more of a personal CFO manner. And then over the past year, merged with a marketing agency as well, just to continue to grow what we're able to provide for these business owners. In the background behind it all, we run a couple equity funds as well. So we're investing in multifamily properties as well, helping business owners and professionals, doctors, lawyers, et cetera, be able to invest in a different asset class they normally wouldn't have access to on their own.
And we've specifically touched on the topic of focusing on a niche client segment. And in your case, you guys are really looking to work with a exclusive group of small business owners. So getting in now to the topic, the client discovery process, what does that process initially look like for you guys as you're trying to ascertain whether it's someone that you're able to help and support?
For sure. So I always like to step back and we encourage our team to do the same thing of like, would I be wanting to get a beer with this person on a Friday night? That's kind of our initial phase.
We talk about having the no asshole policy. So
yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Exactly. So, it's one, we want to live a life of enjoyment. So where this process even started, deciding who we want to work with initially, was my self-discovery and where do I get my energy from and what sucks my energy as well, which started to lead down this path towards this niche business owner world. The other thing we've got to find, we have to find opportunities for growth. So ideally for us, they're right at the beginning of that hockey stick curve of growth, where our value can become, more and more prominent as their business gets more complex. So if it's a solopreneur that wants to remain a solopreneur for the rest of their life, it's probably not a good fit for us. If it's an e-commerce company that's been on Shark Tank in the past, that's looking to get acquired in the next 3 years, that's a great client for us.
So once you identify somebody that you want to work with, you feel you can help and support, what's the next step for you guys? How are you walking through that? And maybe if you can talk a little bit, you and I were talking earlier, and you mentioned that it's been a development, it's been an ongoing process as you've kind of built that discovery process. If you could share a little bit about that as well, Robert?
For sure. So one thing, if I rewind back a few years, one of the greatest things that I learned from one of the coaches I had was to ask more questions. Leaders are remembered by the questions that they ask. Now, what he didn't teach you is you have to remember these answers, right? So you also have to take good notes along the way and make sure you remember the answers that you're given. But that's where at the core where it starts at, even if we're discovering, is this the right client for us? Are we the right service for them? It comes back to us asking those good questions as we're initially meeting. Because what we've found is, hey, our service is unique, it's different, it's not quite financial planning, it's not quite business coaching, it's not really marketing consulting, it's somewhere in the middle. And our goal, rather than be able to state, here's exactly what we're going to do for you, our goal is, hey, can we understand really where they are at today, point A, where they want to go, point B, and then them understand that we're the person to get them there from A to B. And that's going to be different for every single business owner because of what they value. So really our process, starting out from the beginning is just getting to know them, asking a lot of great questions. Our goal in that is not to provide value by fixing their problems in these meetings, especially before they're a client of ours. Our goal is to ask the right questions to get them to think about things in a different way, or to discover new opportunities or new challenges that they may not be looking at. Then really up until that point, we're trying to collect the right information to know, hey, how can we price our structure? What team members from our team are going to be involved? What's their, is it just finance? Is it marketing? Is it some combination of both? What tax, we love tax planning. So what are those tax opportunities that we can see? And then that helps us put together our pricing model. From there, really, we present that here's the services we can provide, here's the price, and then it's up to them, yes or no. And over time, we've evolved this process where, thankfully for me, now we have a team in place where from the moment that they say yes, other than me having to put my signature on one side of the contract and approve a welcome email, I don't meet with that client again until we've already received all their onboarding information. They have their payment set up. We've collected first payment. Our experience coordinator is typically scheduled 4 or 5 meetings out over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I'm able to purely show up to that first meeting. We've already got the information we need to really make that valuable and useful and just get started with the client.
So from the time that you are introduced to a new business owner until the time where they say yes, and then you set up that plan where you're going to be coming in later down the road with a lot more information, how long does that process typically take?
Yeah, so from the moment we initially meet that business owner, it's hard to say. We've closed deals in 2 weeks. We've closed deals in a year and a half as well, just depending on how we build that relationship over time. But if they've typically been introduced to us with a clear problem that the individual that's referred them to us knows we can help them with, that process is typically fairly quick. There's also, from the moment they say yes, there's a lot of intentionality. Like we lay out our process very clear to the client as far as, hey, you don't have time to waste. Our team doesn't have time to waste either. So our first step is to get a contract signed, the first payment collected, and we have an onboarding questionnaire. But we set the expectation of, hey, I'm not going to sit down and meet with you until all these boxes have been checked, all these documents have been sent to our team. We get access to these certain things that we need inside your business. So just because you've paid us the first time doesn't mean we're walking into the meeting next day, because that's not going to be a valuable meeting for any of us because we don't know the ins and outs of your business. So that process for most clients, since we started doing that, because they've already written a check, tends to be fairly quick, to the tune of a week or two, where they've got all our information and we're meeting in week 3. Sometimes it's taken, we bill monthly. Sometimes it's taken into that 4th or 5th week, and they see that second bill and it's like, hey, I'm paying for the service. Like I need to actually start using it. Right. So
can you talk a little bit about the actual services, Robert? So you're kind of combining that finance, marketing, or you have all these different services you can offer. So for somebody who's looking for help and support, what is it that you're able to kind of bring that differentiates you guys in terms of how you're helping your clients?
Yeah, so I'll back up to that after we've crossed the line into a client, service relationship. That first meeting is all around their values and what they want to accomplish, and not as much as like, hey, I want to have a $10 million net worth in the next 3 years. I want to exit my business in 5 years. It's like, what do you value as a person? Is it, and we have specific exercises that we walk through that actually I was able to take away from the the BFA, behavioral finance. And that really helps us understand, are they trying to build freedom? Like, are they trying to get outside of their business? Do they value wealth and the creation that your business can allow you to do that? So that's where we start. From there, the services we start to plug in. I'm a nerd when it comes to tax planning, so that's typically the first route I love to go, because that's typically where we can actually show them a check from the work that we've already done that typically pays for our fee for at least a year to 3 years. In most cases, I'd say roughly 80% of the time so far, we've been able to pay for ourselves just in tax planning alone. And then the fun actually begins. A lot of that has to do with, these business owners, even in the way that we're trained to forecast. Like, forecasting is great for going out and raising capital. It's great to celebrate with your team at the beginning of the year of what we're going to do over the next 1 to 5 years. And then that forecast goes in the trash can or in the filing cabinet, because 2 months later, when you're growing, like most of these companies are growing, that forecast is irrelevant. So we help them break it down into what are we actually accomplishing over the next 12 weeks, breaking that down into 2-week intervals, and then trying to provide some North Star of like a year to 5 years. What's the bigger picture we're going towards? So that can look like fractional CFO services. So we actually get into the forecasting. We're double checking their bookkeeping. I'm very clear of like, I never want to be an accountant. I took enough of those classes in college to know I'm not interested in bookkeeping whatsoever. And then start to get a feel for their budget. What are they paying themselves? How are they paying themselves? And then when we come to their growth goals, that's where, hey, strategic marketing, tactical marketing starts to come into play. And it's really just a cycle that feeds itself. Marketing brings in more revenue brings in more complexity, and then goes, circles from there. I'd say this. Oh,
no, go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
And I'd say the step we take it further is we attach those business goals and those targets that we're setting and those activities that we're tracking into their personal life. Like that is tied to, hey, your spouse wants a cabin in the mountains, and in order to do that, we have to do this, and we're going to get that from your business. But so it brings a different relationship and a connection where it's just not a sales target or a revenue target. It's actually, this is what it's going to accomplish for your family and the impact you want to create in your community.
So, this is, pretty robust. And you mentioned that you're planning out and the process can take some time. What is the typical engagement, once you get through that onboarding process? What is the expectation? I guess, I'm sure each business is different, but in general, what is the length of time that you're typically, looking to support and work with these business owners?
Yeah. So in most cases, there's been multiple instances over the past few months where we started to take on more project work in the marketing world for some larger organizations, or I'd say higher mid-sized businesses at this point. That's more project based, so it's 3 to 6 months at a time. For us, if we're looking at our full scope of work, the way our contract reads is it's in perpetuity until one of us gives a 30-day notice. So we don't sign contracts for a year. We don't sign a contract for 5 years. It is purely a month-to-month contract, but we build those relationships in a way that we can work with these business owners forever because, they realize, and we realize as they grow, there's just more questions and more things to work on that we can provide value. So there hasn't been an instance where we've gone in to do our full scope it's been for 3 months or 6 months. We do warn them, hey, in the first 2 to 3 months, we're probably going to meet 6 to 8 times. You're going to get used to talking to us quite often. And then we tend to transfer more towards every month or every other week in our conversations. So then it starts to, we do set the expectation of like, hey, it's going to feel like, you miss us. You haven't seen us in a bit. But it's because we're front loading a lot of this work that we need. We're basically taking a loss on our work in the first 2 to 3 months until we can get you into a place where we can meet, every month or every other week.
And as you mentioned, it's a cycle that feeds itself when you're offering that the financial support, helping get things in line on that end, and then the marketing support, the building and growth, like you talked about, it ends up kind of feeding itself and becoming, businesses are going to have more needs over time as they continue to grow. When you and I talked earlier a couple months ago, we were kind of going through back and forth on a few topics that we could get into, and maybe we will set this up as a standalone topic at some point. But you mentioned taxes. Every business is going to be different, but can you give a couple of examples on how you're able to through that client discovery process find and identify some opportunities to save on taxes with businesses, just kind of at that general level?
Yeah, so there's some simple, just easy ones that you can pick up in your initial conversations with them. Some has to do with the structure of the entity itself. Is it LLC? Is it taxed as an S corp? Is it taxed as a C corp? How are they paying themselves? If we hear, hey, my accountant told me to be an S corp, but I'm not paying myself anything, like that's a red flag as well, not only to us but the IRS. So that's an instance. I'll say every single client we've ever worked with has not effectively used like the Augusta strategy, for example, where you can rent out your house for 14 days without paying taxes on that income, and you can rent it out to another business. And there's a certain process you want to go through, but that's typically anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000 of tax savings immediately that you can provide to them just by simply implementing that. We get into some more fun and exciting things, like there's ways you can use Wyoming C corps, for example, to hold IP for a company and license that where they don't have a corporate income tax rate, license it back to the company, whether it be mainly product-based companies, where effectively you can negate your corporate income tax, state tax rate as well. And there's some more complexities there where it gets really fun for us. But then we're talking to the tune of, $400,000 to $800,000 that we've saved a client in taxes. In just a simple I put that in quotation marks, strategy such as that. But yeah, the most common ones you hear is just, if you hear S corp but they're not paying themselves, or you hear I'm a C corp but it's a business that's under $1 million, there's a few quick wins that you can find for your clients there.
So you're not offering specific tax advice, so how does that play into it? Are you referring out to CPAs? Are you working with the clients existing CPAs? How does that work, Robert?
Yeah, so what we discovered as we were asking good questions of our clients is a lot of times they have a CPA relationship that is a little bit strained, and they feel like they're not getting the proactive support that they want. And part of that is they're placing an expectation on their CPA or bookkeeper that shouldn't be there. Like, your CPA or bookkeeper is there to keep you in compliance with the IRS and to report to you what's actually happened. That, there are some great CPAs out there that will cross the line into proactive advice and proactive planning. But for most of the business owners that we've worked with, they're really good about keeping you in compliance with the IRS. So a lot of times we bring these concepts to the CPA, the math checks out and they say, yes, let's do it. And then the CPA is the one that has to actually go file the documents and do all the work. That's where it comes back to, we do the strategic thinking and planning for them. So for example, like I gave up my licenses to manage investments. So that's where we partner heavily with investment advisors as well, because I can't start a 401k. I can't manage a Roth for these people. So we can't give specific allocation advice, legally, where we can say, this is what you should invest in. But we can say, hey, at this stage of the game, we see a lot of people using a Roth, or we see people, hey, you're crossing that point into a 401k. Who do you have in your circle that you'd like to use, or who can we connect you with? And then we're really quarterbacking the team for them, helping them ask the right questions to the right people. yeah, we bring in attorneys, we bring in CPAs, we bring in financial advisors almost in every relationship.
So shifting gears then from that finance side over to the marketing side, how does that look with a firm that may already have an existing marketing team, or they're already working? How does that work on the marketing side, Robert?
Yeah. So what we found when these companies are on that upward trajectory of growth on that hockey stick curve, most of the time they've done a great job of, like, they may have one particular marketing skill set themselves. Maybe they can design, they're a designer and creative, they can build a website, but they've started to pull people from their circle. So maybe they found somebody on Upwork for their social media, maybe their friend or family member is great at posting on Instagram, and they've kind of collected this, not hodgepodge team, but that's what it ends up turning into, is a group of specialists that are already in their circle. And at the core, no one's given them what is the strategic plan at the top level that we're all coordinating to make sure we're building a marketing ecosystem that feeds itself. So that's on the marketing side where we initially step in, is like, hey, let's not break the relationships you already have. Let's just make sure we're using those relationships in the right way. And along the way, we may discover, hey, we need to bring in an expert on this side over here in SEO. We need to do something over here with your social media, and some of the service like we can provide as a team, but we're very careful to go in as, hey, we want to leverage the relationships you already have and make sure they're working cohesively together.
So you mentioned that building this out, asking a lot of questions was important, and putting together that process. What advice would you have for somebody who has yet to really develop, or at least develop an efficient process for that client discovery? What advice would you have for either advisors or other small business owners in terms of what you've learned in constructing yours?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say off the bat is don't try to do it all at once. I had done that multiple occasions in the past where I'm like, hey, let's map out our entire system from the time we first talk to someone all the way until they're 6 months into the relationship and they're a great client that's bringing us referrals. And it's great, you build that map, you get a lot of information, but taking action when there's so many pieces of the puzzle in front of you is really hard, at least for me. Maybe there's other people out there that are great about seeing all that and can systematically work through it while they're keeping their business running. I just haven't been able to do that. So my encouragement is, don't change all four tires while you're driving down the highway, and just start out where you can start to fix and build and tinker. So we start with this concept in our business because we want to encourage ideas. So we have a board specifically where it's ideation, experimentation, and implementation. So we could be in meetings and throughout the week, and somebody bring up a great idea of like, what if we could try this for our client? We don't want to forget about it. We want to be able to take advantage of those ideas someday, but we're not about to solve that in our weekly huddle. So instead, we're going to throw this on the board. And that's really where it started out for us. The other thing I'd suggest is stepping back and defining like, what is success for this onboarding process. And that could be multiple different things depending on who you are and what your practice is like. For us, it came down to really three different things. It was the client experience. Like, we want to provide an amazing client experience to generate those referrals. We also want to provide a great internal experience as well. We don't want team members that don't enjoy doing certain things having to do it because that's a process that we've built. And maybe that's a little self-serving because I can't stand paperwork, I can't stand emails, I can't stand scheduling, anything like that. But we've got, experienced coordinator on our team that she's amazing at all that stuff. And in fact, before we had this call, I was like, hey, I know at some point you built a template, we all built a template together of this onboarding experience. Like, where was that? So that I could bring it up. So it's building that process in a way that's transferable and scalable at the same time. But yeah, take it slow, bite off, one piece at a time. But also start with, what is success in that? And that doesn't always have to be in the client's point of view. It can also be in your point of view.
So if I'm a financial advisor, Robert, and I'm looking to either utilize your services or potentially partner with you, as you mentioned, maybe I have a client to refer. What's the best route for an advisor to get in touch with you to engage on any of those fronts?
For sure. I love connecting on LinkedIn. So that would be a great place to start. The other would be just shoot me an email. So robert@missioncultivate.com. That's also on my LinkedIn as well. We don't have any financial advisors we work with specifically on like a client service relationship, but we have multiple referral relationships or connections. Our goal is actually to make their life easier. So if we can come with a business client that's we've already sold them on the idea they need a 401k, they probably need some insurance to protect themselves, et cetera. And then we can walk into the advisor's office and let them do what they do best rather than having to sell them on the concepts. That's how we've generally been able to make great relationships with those other professionals in the industry.
Nice. And I think you're delivering a lot of value to your clients and helping to support those businesses. Obviously, in terms of what we're trying to do, those partnerships that you're building with advisors, I mean, that's obviously something that a lot of the people that are in our group will be interested in potentially connecting with you about. Robert, there's a lot of different ways we can go with topics down the road. So we talked, like I said, we talked about taxes. We went down a couple of different pathways to get to this one this week, but definitely appreciate you joining us, sharing your insight, and I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity for us to continue engaging down the road. So thank you so much for joining us.
For sure. No, I look forward to more conversations down the road.